The emergency klaxons at Earth's orbital repair station Delta weren't necessary to announce the arrival of the Thulian battlecruiser. The violet-white glow of its failing quantum drive did that job well enough. The massive vessel limped through space like a wounded beast, trailing streams of quantum particles that lit up the void in impossible colors. Chief Engineer Jack Thompson watched from the station's observation deck, his weathered features illuminated by the ethereal display. Behind him, 3 junior engineers traded worried whispers about the approaching ship's condition. The Thulians were known throughout the galaxy for their engineering prowess. If they couldn't fix whatever was wrong, what hope did a primitive human station have? "Would you look at that beauty?" Thompson said, his voice carrying the same tone others used for classic cars. He took a long sip from his coffee mug, the one that read, "If it ain't broke, you're not trying hard enough." "Mason, start prepping Bay 3. Tell the quantum containment team to bring every spare capacitor we've got." The docking procedure took twice as long as normal. The battlecruiser's systems were so far gone that they had to guide in manually using the station's magnetic tethers. By the time the airlock seals engaged, a small crowd had gathered to watch. It wasn't every day that one of the most advanced ships in known space crawled to their doorstep. The Thulian engineering team emerged first, 6 tall, silicon-based beings whose crystalline forms caught and reflected the emergency lighting. Their captain followed, his core matrix pulsing with what Thompson recognized as extreme agitation. "I am Grand Engineer Zixtal," the captain announced, his translation matrix converting the crystal chimes of his native speech into English. "We request permission to dock for approximately 182 local days while we await replacement parts from the homeworld." Thompson stepped forward, already rolling up his sleeves. 6 months. That's a bit excessive, don't you think? The alien captain's crystal segments shifted in what might have been surprise or offense. "The quantum drive core has suffered a critical cascade failure. The containment matrix is beyond repair, and the regulatory systems have." "Yeah, I can see the quantum bleed from here," Thompson interrupted, already walking toward the ship. "But that's not your main problem. Your primary issue is that someone tried to boost your power output without accounting for the heat distribution." The Thulian engineering team erupted in musical chimes that the translator didn't even try to keep up with. Captain Zixtal's form became rigid. That would be impossible for you to know." Thompson grinned. "Let me guess, recent combat engagement needed a little extra juice to the weapons systems. Instead of properly modifying the power grid, someone did a quick bypass using the secondary coolant system as a power conduit. Worked great for about 10 minutes, right up until the heat buildup hit critical mass. The silence that followed was deafening. Thompson could actually hear the hum of the station's life support systems. "Give me 72 hours, he said, already typing notes into his tablet. "Mason, get me those modified Tesla coils we've been experimenting with. Phillips, I need the quantum shielding arrays from the prototype project. And somebody find me some duct tape." 72 hours. Captain Zixtal's translator actually crackled with distortion. Even with a full homeworld engineering team and all proper replacement parts, the minimum repair time would be 3 days, Thompson repeated firmly. "And I'll throw in a 10% efficiency boost on your primary power systems. No charge." As his team scrambled into action, Thompson could hear the Thulian engineers discussing among themselves in rapid, crystal-clear tones. He didn't need a translator to know. They thought he was either insane or running some kind of scam. That was fine. He'd gotten used to that look from alien engineers. They all had the same expression at first, right up until the moment they learned why human repair stations had the highest success rate in known space. Sometimes the best solutions didn't come from advanced technology or complex theories. Sometimes they came from a species that had spent its entire history finding ways to fix things that should have been impossible to repair. 68 hours later, Captain Zixtel stood in the engine room of his battlecruiser, his crystalline form reflecting the now steady blue glow of the quantum drive. The ship's diagnostic systems had been running the same tests for the past hour, and each result made less sense than the last. "This is impossible," the captain's second engineer chimed, her translation matrix struggling to convey her bewilderment. "The power output is 15.3% above factory specifications, but the heat generation is 20% lower. These readings cannot be correct." Thompson leaned against a bulkhead, tossing a makeshift quantum stabilizer, cobbled together from an old gaming console's processing unit, from hand to hand. "Oh, those readings are accurate. Turns out your factory standard heat sinks were actually working against the natural quantum flow. We just had to reverse the polarity and add a couple of modified cooling arrays." "Modified with what?" the second engineer asked, her crystal segments shifting in patterns that suggested deep distress. "Well," Thompson grinned, gesturing to the silvery material now, wrapping several key junction points. "You'd be amazed what you can do with some high-grade duct tape and a little creative thinking." The news spread through subspace channels faster than a quantum particle cascade. Within 24 hours, 3 more alien vessels had coincidentally developed engineering problems near Earth's orbit. By the end of the week, Station Delta's repair crew had ships from 7 different species, each insisting their problems were too complex for human engineers to handle. Thompson was in the middle of explaining to a hive-mind engineering collective why their biomechanical propulsion system would work better with a simple lubricant change when Mason burst into his office. "Chief, you need to see this." The junior engineer was actually out of breath. "The hegemony science vessel Eternal Wisdom just dropped out of FTL at the edge of our system. They're claiming total engine failure." "The Eternal Wisdom." Thompson set down his coffee mug. "Isn't that the same ship that won the Galactic Engineering Excellence Award last year?" "The very same." Mason's grin threatened to split his face. "Their chief engineer wrote that paper about how human repair techniques were dangerously primitive and unstable." Thompson checked his calendar and sighed theatrically. "Well, would you look at that? Their engine failed right when we had an opening in Bay 4. What are the odds?" The hegemony vessel's arrival caused quite a stir. Its hull was covered in more advanced technology than most species had in their entire engineering archives. The ship's engineering team, led by the infamous Dr. Krulax, who had multiple degrees in theoretical quantum mechanics, emerged from their ship with an air of barely concealed curiosity. "We find ourselves in need of your services," Dr. Krulax announced, each word carefully chosen. "Though I must stress that our systems are far too advanced for. Your primary power coupling is out of alignment by about 3 degrees, Thompson interrupted, not looking up from his diagnostic tablet. "It's causing a cascade effect through your secondary systems. Pretty simple fix, actually." The silence that followed was broken only by Mason's poorly concealed snicker. That would be. How could you possibly know that?" Dr. Krulax's tentacles writhed in what might have been embarrassment. "Because," Thompson finally looked up, his eyes twinkling, "I can hear it. That high-pitched whine coming from your port side. Classic sign of misaligned power systems. We used to get the same thing in old Earth generators before we figured out proper mounting techniques. The repair took less than 6 hours. By the time the Eternal Wisdom departed, its systems were running at 120% efficiency, and Dr. Krulax was quietly requesting copies of Earth's engineering manuals." That evening, as Thompson watched the hegemony vessel disappear into FTL, Mason brought him a fresh cup of coffee. "You know what this means, right?" The junior engineer asked. They're all going to start coming here now. Thompson took a long sip from his mug and smiled. Good. It's about time the galaxy learned that sometimes the best solutions don't come from the most advanced technology. They come from engineers who've spent their lives learning to fix things with whatever they have on hand. The Hegemony Engineering Council Chamber was a monument to advanced technology. Quantum holograms danced through the air. Display screens made of pure energy lined the walls, and the council members themselves sat on gravity-defying platforms that adjusted their height based on their speaking order. It was, in Thompson's opinion, the most ridiculously over-engineered room he'd ever seen. The human engineering situation has become untenable, High Counselor Vex Thor announced, his voice resonating through the chamber's perfect acoustics. In the past month alone, 17 major vessels have accidentally suffered breakdowns near Earth's repair stations. This cannot continue. Thompson stood at the center of the chamber, still wearing his work coveralls with the Station Delta logo. He'd been given exactly 2 hours' notice about this emergency council session, and he'd spent one of those hours finishing a repair job on a Maraxian mining vessel. I fail to see the problem, he said, deliberately taking a sip from his ever-present coffee mug. Ships need repairs. We fix them. Seems pretty straightforward to me. The problem. Another counselor cut in, their holographic form flickering with agitation. Is that you're disrupting centuries of established engineering protocols? Your methods are unorthodox, untested, and quite possibly dangerous. They work, though, don't they? The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien languages, each species trying to talk over the others. High Counselor Vex Thor had to use the room's sound dampening system to restore order. Very well. Vex Thor's voice had taken on a smugly superior tone. If you're so confident in human engineering capabilities, perhaps you'd be willing to prove it. We have a challenge for you. The chamber's central hologram shifted, displaying a massive ship of unlike any design Thompson had ever seen. Its hull was smooth, almost organic in appearance, with no visible external systems or components. This, Vex Thor announced with theatrical flourish, is a precursor vessel. We discovered it 3 centuries ago in the Outer Rim. In all that time, none of our most brilliant engineers have been able to even power up its systems, let alone understand how they work. Thompson walked around the hologram, his eyes narrowing as he studied the ship's design. Where's the access panel? The what? The access panel. You know, where you get in to do maintenance. Thompson made a gesture like opening a panel. Every ship's got one, usually near the primary power core. The council members exchanged glances. We have never found such a panel. Our scans indicate the hull is a single continuous piece of unknown material. Huh. Thompson reached out and manipulated the hologram, zooming in on various sections. And in 300 years, nobody thought to just look for a button. The silence that followed was almost painful. We have applied the most advanced scanning technology in known space, Vex Thor said stiffly. We have analyzed every quantum signature, every energy pattern, every possible. Yeah, but did you try pushing all the parts that look like they might be buttons? Thompson interrupted. Because this thing here. He pointed to a small, almost invisible circle on the hull. That looks an awful lot like a reset switch to me. The council chamber erupted again, this time with various species either laughing in disbelief or expressing outrage at such a primitive suggestion. Very well, Vex Thor's voice cut through the chaos. If you think the solution is so simple, then perhaps you'd care to demonstrate. The ship is currently in orbit around our research station in the Proxima system. You have 1 week to power it up. If you fail, Earth's repair stations will submit to hegemony oversight and regulation. Thompson took another sip of his coffee, already making mental notes about what tools he'd need to pack. And if we succeed, If you somehow succeed, which you won't, the Council will formally recognize human engineering methods as valid and acceptable throughout hegemony space. Deal. Thompson extended his hand, then remembered most Council members were holograms. 1 week is more than enough time to push a few buttons. As he left the chamber, he could hear the Council members already planning how they would implement their new oversight regulations. That was fine. They'd learn soon enough that sometimes the most advanced solution wasn't the right one. Sometimes you just needed to try the simple thing first. The precursor ship hung in space like a sleeping giant, its smooth hull reflecting the light of Proxima's twin stars. Thompson stood at the observation window of the research station, while behind him, 24 of the galaxy's most renowned engineers argued about quantum harmonics and subspace matrices. The power signatures clearly indicate a hyperdimensional phase variance. One engineer insisted, their tentacles waving at a holographic display. We must account for all 11 dimensions of spacetime before. If we don't consider the quantum entanglement patterns first, another cut in. Any attempt to interface with the systems could cause a cascade. Thompson tuned them out, focusing instead on the ship itself. Mason stood next to him, both of them sipping coffee from their station Delta mugs. "Notice anything weird about those surface markings, kid?" Thompson asked, pointing to a series of faint lines along the hull. Mason squinted. "They look almost like writing. But the universal translator can't make sense of them, because everyone's been treating them like technical specifications." Thompson grinned. "They're not. They're safety labels." The young engineer's eyes widened. "You mean like the kind we put on every access panel back home? Warning: check power supply before servicing. Caution: high voltage. That sort of thing." Before Mason could respond, a new voice cut through the debate. "If the humans are quite finished staring out windows, perhaps they'd like to join the actual technical discussion." Dr. Krulax had arrived from the Eternal Wisdom, along with a team of theoretical engineers. The alien scientists' tentacles were wrapped around several advanced scanning devices. "Actually," Thompson said, already walking toward the airlock, "I think it's time we took a little walk." The expression of horror that crossed the alien engineers' faces would have been comical if it wasn't so genuine. "You can't mean to actually board the vessel. We haven't completed the preliminary quantum analysis or the—" "Mason," Thompson called over his shoulder, "grab the toolkit, the basic one." 20 minutes later, Thompson stood before what the alien engineers had been calling an quantum encrypted access matrix. But what his eyes told him was very obviously a regular old door. The surface markings around it were faded but clear enough. "These aren't technical schematics," he explained to the stunned audience watching through his helmet cam. "They're instructions, basic maintenance instructions, written in the simplest possible way, so anyone could understand them, once they figure out the language." "Impossible." Dr. Krulax's voice crackled through the comm. "The precursors were the most advanced species in known history. Their technology was designed to be maintained." Thompson interrupted. "Look at this symbol here. Universal engineering language. Power supply status. And this one. That's a warning about system pressure. The ship isn't dead or broken. It's in sleep mode, running minimal power to keep something inside alive." Following the simple pictograms, Thompson located what could only be a manual release. It was almost hidden under centuries of space dust, but the basic mechanism was clear enough. He pressed it. The entire ship hummed to life. Status lights began blinking on in sequence, each one following a pattern that any first-year engineering student would recognize as a basic power-up sequence. Through his boots, Thompson could feel the gentle vibration of systems coming online. "But how?" someone asked through the comm. "Our most advanced analysis. Sometimes the simplest answer is the right one," Thompson said, already moving to the next panel. The precursors didn't build their ships to be puzzles. They built them to work, to last, and to be fixed when they broke, just like we do. The internal lights came on, revealing corridors that could have been designed by human engineers. Clean, logical, with clear access panels and maintenance routes. "Mason," Thompson called, his voice full of wonder and professional appreciation. "Bring the full kit. And tell those theoretical engineers to start taking notes. They're about to learn why the most advanced civilizations don't hide their access panels." Inside the precursor vessel, every new discovery left the alien engineers more bewildered, and Thompson more delighted. The ship's systems were a masterclass in elegant design, not because they were complex, but because they were brilliantly simple. "Look at this power distribution network," Thompson said, pointing to what appeared to be a standard circuit panel. No quantum entanglement, no hyperspace taps. Just pure, efficient energy transfer using basic principles of electromagnetic conduction. Dr. Krulax floated nearby, all 8 of his tentacles clutching different scanning devices. But it's so primitive. The energy output shouldn't even be possible with such basic components. "That's because you're thinking about it wrong," Mason called from inside an access tunnel. "These systems aren't primitive. They're refined. Every component does exactly what it needs to do, nothing more, nothing less." Thompson nodded proudly at his apprentice's observation. The kid was learning fast. The real breakthrough came when they reached the ship's central archive. The holographic displays activated as soon as they entered, showing technical diagrams and what appeared to be maintenance logs. But it was the personal journal entries that changed everything. "I can't believe what I'm reading," the translation expert they'd brought along said, her voice filled with wonder. "These aren't just technical manuals. They're engineering philosophies. Listen to this entry. The mark of true technological achievement is not in creating something so advanced that only its creators can maintain it. Rather, it is in creating something so fundamentally sound that anyone, given basic tools and understanding, can repair and improve upon it. This is how knowledge spreads. This is how civilizations grow." Thompson ran his hand along a nearby console, feeling the subtle texture of the material. They built their technology to last, but more than that, they built it to be understood. Every system has manual backups. Every component can be replaced with basic materials. It's beautiful. Impossible. Dr. Krulax's color had shifted to a deep purple of distress. The precursors were masters of hyperspace engineering. Their quantum mathematics were centuries beyond our own. They used all that knowledge to make things simpler, not more complex. Thompson interrupted. He'd found another journal entry. "Look here. They talk about their design philosophy. Every innovation, every advancement, was focused on one goal: making their technology more reliable, more repairable, and more accessible to other species." Mason emerged from another access panel, his face streaked with ancient dust, but grinning. "Chief, you need to see this. I found their maintenance bay. It looks a lot like Bay 3 back home." The maintenance bay was a revelation. Tools lined the walls in logical order, each one designed to be used by various physiologies. The repair stations were adjustable for different sizes and types of species. Most importantly, every tool was based on simple physical principles: levers, pulleys, basic electronic diagnostics. They weren't just building ships, Thompson said softly, reading through more translated logs. They were building a legacy. Every system, every component, was designed so that any species with a basic understanding of physics and engineering could learn to maintain it. But why? One of the hegemony engineers asked. Why make such advanced technology so simple? Thompson picked up what was obviously a precursor wrench. Different materials, different scale, but the basic design unchanged across millennia. Because they understood something we've known on Earth for a long time. The most important part of any technology isn't how advanced it is, but how well you can fix it when it breaks. He turned to face the gathered engineers, the wrench still in his hand. They didn't hide their knowledge behind complexity. They used their advanced understanding to make things that would last, that could be repaired with materials found on any world, by any species willing to learn the basics. The silence that followed was profound. In that moment, every engineer present understood. They had been pursuing advancement in entirely the wrong direction. The most advanced civilization in known space had achieved their greatness not by making things more complex, but by making the complex simple. The Hegemony Council chamber had never been so chaotic. Representatives from a dozen major species were shouting over each other, their universal translators creating a cacophony of overlapping arguments. The usual holographic displays were supplemented by emergency news feeds from across the galaxy, all showing the same images. The precursor ship, now fully operational, and the damning evidence found within. Thompson stood at the center of the storm, calmly sipping his coffee. Mason stood beside him, frantically taking notes on his tablet. This is outrageous. The Exarillion Trade Minister's scales were flashing warning colors. Do you realize what this will do to the engineering industry? Billions of credits in maintenance contracts, specialized tools, proprietary systems, all at risk because of this primitive approach. You mean because people might learn how to fix their own ships? Thompson asked mildly. Doesn't sound like much of a crisis to me. High Counselor Vexthor slammed a crystalline appendage against his podium. Order. We must have order. The chamber's sound dampeners kicked in, forcing everyone into silence. Now then, we have a serious situation to address. The human engineer Thompson has not only activated the precursor vessel, but has exposed what some are calling a disturbing truth about our current engineering practices. Disturbing. Thompson set down his coffee mug. I'd call it enlightening. The most advanced species we've ever discovered built their technology to be maintained by anyone with basic tools and knowledge. Meanwhile, modern ships need specialized equipment just to open an access panel. Dr. Krulax floated forward, his tentacles now a nervous gray. The data from the precursor archives is quite clear. Their engineering philosophy was based on principles of universal access and maintainability, much like current human approaches. The chamber erupted again, but this time with a new voice rising above the chaos. Junior Engineer Skavat, fresh from the Zixthulian Engineering Academy, activated their speaking crystal. I've been studying the maintenance logs from Station Delta. The young engineer's voice rang clear. Their repair times are 80% faster than our best facilities. Their success rate is nearly perfect. And their methods. They paused, crystal structure shifting nervously. Their methods are almost identical to those described in the precursor archives. Impossible. The Exarillion minister hissed. Humans are barely space capable. Their technology is centuries behind. Behind what? Thompson interrupted. Behind ships that break down if you don't use the manufacturer's certified quantum spanner. Behind systems so complex that only the original engineers can fix them. He pulled out his tablet, displaying schematics from the precursor ship. These primitive designs have been running for thousands of years. How long does your latest model last before it needs a factory refit? The silence that followed was deafening. Mason cleared his throat. We found something else in the archives too. Something about the evolution of galactic engineering practices. He tapped his tablet, and new holograms filled the chamber. It seems this shift toward complexity over functionality. It wasn't natural. It was deliberately engineered by certain corporate interests about 3 centuries ago. The chamber exploded into chaos once again. Several council members turned colors that their species weren't supposed to be capable of. The Exarillion trade minister tried to leave, but found the doors mysteriously locked. "I move for an immediate investigation," Dr. Krulax announced, their voice cutting through the disorder. Not just into the engineering practices, but into the corporate influences that have shaped them. The precursor archives make it clear technology should unite species, not create dependencies. High Counselor Vexthor's crystal structure had taken on a distinctly uncomfortable pattern. This could destabilize the entire galactic economy. "Maybe it needs destabilizing," Thompson said, picking up his coffee mug again. "Maybe it's time we all remembered what engineering is really about. Building things that work, that last, and that anyone can fix when they break." As the council descended into arguments about investigations and economic impacts, Thompson and Mason headed for the exit. They had work to do back at Station Delta. Real engineering work. The kind that actually kept ships flying and crews safe. "You know this isn't over, right, Chief?" Mason asked, as they left the chamber. Thompson grinned. "Of course not. It's just getting started. And wait until they see what else we found in those archives about simplified faster-than-light travel." The Galactic Engineering Summit was usually a state affair, full of technical presentations and theoretical discussions. This year was different. The main auditorium was packed to capacity, with representatives from every major species crammed into the viewing galleries. The tension in the room was so thick you could almost see it. Thompson stood on the presentation floor, his workbench set up next to what everyone recognized as the latest model quantum drive from Cerillion Advanced Systems, the most complex and advanced engine in known space. "Today," he announced, not bothering with the formal introductions traditional to the summit, "we're going to talk about something that seems to have been forgotten in all our rush for advancement. The fundamentals of good engineering." The Exarillion trade minister, seated in the front row, shifted uncomfortably. Behind him, Dr. Krulax's tentacles were already taking notes. "This engine," Thompson gestured to the quantum drive, "costs more than most small ships. It requires special tools just to open the housing. The maintenance manual is longer than the complete works of Shakespeare, and yet," he pulled out a simple scanner from his tool belt, "it's running at barely 60% efficiency." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Exarillion minister started to stand, but Thompson was already moving to his next point. "The problem isn't that it's advanced technology. The problem is that it's deliberately overcomplicated." He started removing the engine's outer casing, using standard tools rather than the manufacturer's specialized equipment. "Look at this power routing. 3 separate systems doing the job that one could do better. Cooling arrays that fight each other for no reason except to justify proprietary parts." Mason, operating the holographic display, showed detailed scans of each component as Thompson dismantled them. "Now, watch this." Thompson reached into his toolbox and pulled out what looked like scrap parts from a dozen different species technologies. "Using nothing but basic components and tools you can find in any repair bay, we're going to make this engine run better than it ever has." Over the next hour, Thompson gave the most unusual presentation in summit history. He didn't just talk about engineering principles. He demonstrated them, live and in real time. He showed how overcomplex systems could be simplified, how standard parts could replace proprietary ones, and how understanding basic principles was more important than having advanced tools. "The strength of human engineering isn't that we're smarter or more advanced," he explained as he worked. "It's that we never forgot the basics. Redundancy where it matters, simplicity where it works, and always make it fixable." The audience watched in stunned silence as he reassembled the engine with his modifications. When he activated it, the power readings shot up to 95% efficiency. "But that's impossible," someone in the crowd shouted. "Those parts aren't rated for." "They don't need to be," Thompson interrupted, "because they're doing the job they were actually designed to do, not fighting through layers of unnecessary complexity. He pulled up the original design specifications, highlighting sections that had been added over the years. Look here and here. These systems weren't added to make the engine better. They were added to make it harder to fix without specialized equipment, to create dependency on the manufacturer. The evidence was undeniable. With each example, each demonstration of unnecessary complexity, the truth became clearer. The galaxy's most advanced technology had been deliberately engineered to be less efficient, less reliable, and most importantly, less repairable. This is why Earth's repair stations work so well, Thompson concluded. We don't try to override the basic laws of physics with overcomplicated solutions. We work with them, using the simplest, most reliable methods available, just like the precursors did. He looked out over the audience, meeting the eyes of young engineers from a dozen species. It's time we remembered what engineering is really about. Not profit margins or market control, but building things that work, things that last, and things that anyone with the right knowledge can fix. The silence that followed was brief, but profound. Then, starting from the back, where the younger engineers sat, applause began to spread through the auditorium. Even Dr. Krlax's tentacles were making a clapping motion. The Exarillion trade minister had long since left the room, but Thompson wasn't worried about him. The future of engineering wasn't in the hands of trade ministers. It was in the hands of the young engineers who were already crowding around his workbench, eager to learn more about the primitive human approach to technology. 5 years after the engineering summit, Station Delta had changed. The original repair bays had been expanded into a sprawling complex that now included the galaxy's first cross-species engineering academy. Ships from every known civilization docked at its berths, but not all of them needed repairs. Many came carrying students eager to learn the human method. Thompson stood in his new office, looking out over the training yards where young engineers from 24 species worked together on various projects. His coffee mug, now slightly more battered, still bore the Station Delta logo. "Chief," Mason burst in, almost colliding with a hovering mechanical diagnostic unit. "The latest results are in from the Galactic Standardization Committee. They've officially adopted the human precursor engineering protocols." Thompson grinned. "About time. How's the Exarillion delegation taking it?" They'd finally given up fighting it. Turns out their profit margins actually went up once they started making simpler, more reliable components. Mason pulled up a holographic display showing market statistics. The new standardized parts are selling better than their old proprietary lines ever did. The changes across the galaxy had been profound. The revelation about deliberately overcomplicated technology had led to a complete overhaul of engineering standards. The Hegemony Engineering Council, now with representatives from Earth, had established new guidelines based on the combined wisdom of human experience and precursor archives. A chime at the door announced Dr. Krlax, their tentacles now adorned with an Earth-style tool belt. "Professor Thompson, your next class is ready. The students are particularly excited about today's lesson on emergency repairs using basic materials." "Professor Thompson," Mason chuckled, "still can't get used to that." Thompson shot him a look. "Watch it, Professor Mason. Don't forget you're teaching the Advanced Improvisation course this afternoon." The academy had become the heart of a new engineering renaissance. Its curriculum combined the best of every species' knowledge: human ingenuity, Xthulian precision, Exarillion energy management, and most importantly, the rediscovered wisdom of the precursors. In the main workshop, students from different worlds worked side by side, learning that the principles of good engineering were universal. A young Xthulian crystal being showed their Meraxian partner how to fine-tune a power coupling, while a human apprentice explained the concept of percussive maintenance to a fascinated group of ethereal energy beings. "You know what the best part is?" Thompson said, as they walked to the classroom. Every ship that leaves here takes these ideas back to their home systems. The old way of doing things, making technology so complex that only a few could maintain it, that's finally dying out. The classroom was one of the new ones, designed to accommodate students of all sizes and physical forms. Today's lesson was simple but critical: emergency repairs with limited resources. On each workbench sat a box of basic tools and what looked like random scraps of technology. "Welcome to Advanced Problem Solving," Thompson announced to his class. "Today, we're going to learn how to fix a quantum drive using nothing but spare parts and common sense. But first, let me tell you a story about a human repair station that changed the galaxy." As he spoke, Thompson could see the same light of understanding in their eyes, whether they were crystal, plasma, or organic, that he'd seen in his own apprentices over the years. The future of engineering wasn't in making things more complex, but in making the complex simple enough for everyone to understand. Outside the classroom window, a precursor ship docked smoothly at one of the station's berths. It was one of several that had been restored using the combined knowledge of human innovation and precursor design. Its systems were a perfect blend of advanced technology and simple functionality, a testament to the new philosophy that had spread throughout known space. The galaxy had finally learned what humans had known all along. The best technology wasn't the most advanced or the most complex. It was the kind that you could fix with a basic toolkit, a good understanding of fundamentals, and maybe, just maybe, a little bit of duct tape.